For our guests, we have been going through the 12 apostles of Jesus, and I've based some information on my own study, research of everything I could find out about the apostles, which for most of them isn't much. Mostly stories and legends and myths that have grown up throughout the years. One of the newer books out is called Apostle by Tom Bissell. It's a very interesting book. It's a thick book, so it's a slow read because it goes into depth about the author's pilgrimage to the places where the relics of the apostles lie. So the scriptures this morning, as they have been throughout, have been scriptures that have dealt with a specific apostle. And all three of these scriptures this morning are about James, son of Zebedee. The last in our apostle series. The feedback from you has been good, so it's probably not like you dreaded this and think, oh God, thank God, it's the last apostle. We conclude with James, son of Zebedee. We have to make that distinction because there's James, son of Alphaeus, which we looked at toward the beginning. While James, son of Zebedee, is the last, don't get the idea that James, son of Zebedee, is the least among the apostles. Simple logic says that James ought to be remembered as one of the greatest of the 12, the original 12. If I were to ask you, name an apostle of Jesus, most of you would probably go, well, Peter, because we know more about Peter than we do probably any other apostle. Peter, the one who denied Jesus 3 times. Also, Peter, the rock upon whom the church was built, and of course the lovely St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, Italy, which is built in remembrance of Peter. Some of you might say, well, I like John. John, because John is called the beloved disciple. John was there with Jesus at the crucifixion in the Gospel of John, and Jesus looks to this apostle and says, take care of my mother. And then we attribute the writings of the Gospel and the letters to the spirit of the Gospel, or the spirit of the Apostle John, and John writes a lot about love. So John, whom Jesus originally called the Son of Thunder, is transformed into an apostle of love. And that's pretty cool to us. So we would remember John. We should have also vivid recollections of the Apostle James, because James is part of what I call the big three: Peter, James, and John. But instead, all we have is this obscure remembrance of this important apostle. James was a Galilean. James was son of Zebedee and brother of John. James probably, with John, his father, or the whole Zebedee family, probably lived in Bethsaida, Julius. In 30 and 31, Bethsaida was renamed Bethsaida Julius as it became home of Roman government. It became a provincial capital in Galilee. It was right on the very northern spot of the Sea of Galilee. And Bethsaida was basically known for its fishing business. There you have remains of the Roman Bethsaida Julius. Bethsaida means house of fish. James was associated in the fishing business with his brother John, his father Zebedee, and probably most likely with a couple of other brothers, Simon Peter and Andrew, these the first 4 disciples called by Jesus. That James and John left their father with hired servants, as the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verse 20 indicates, means that they probably worked in a larger fishing business than maybe just locals. This deep water fishing called for larger boats, and it called for the kinds of nets that would be cast over, and so hence some of Jesus' parables about casting the nets and hauling in a great catch of fish. It also meant that this fishing business required a more able crew and partnerships with other fishermen. James might have certainly been doing well in his fishing business, but like other young fishermen in his circle, James hungered for something more. That's not unlike us in our jobs, to hunger for something more because we're just not quite satisfied with what we're doing. Something also was not right in James' world. When James heard of this wilderness preacher named John the Baptist, tradition says that James went out to him like other disciples. And when this wilderness prophet named John called for repentance and baptism, James was one of those persons who stepped forward into the Jordan, was immersed, and promised to walk closer with God. It's a story of transformation. All of us hunger for that, right? We hunger for that deep transformation, either within ourselves, or our communities, our churches, or the world around us. We search for an authentic and relevant voice that will feed that hunger. This was the case with James and John, and with Andrew and Simon Peter. They were raised within the mainstream of Judaism. They were at first drawn to the prophetic voice of John the Baptist that offered transformation. Then when Jesus appears, James and his brother John and friends Simon Peter and Andrew left to follow Jesus. That's not uncommon because, like us, a person who is on a spiritual quest or journey may stop at several points along the way, may listen to several voices along our journey in life before we find something that will quench what the heart desires. So James left the fishing business and the security that his business offered to follow his new teacher, Jesus of Nazareth. And James became a part of Jesus' inner circle, a group of three: Peter, James, and John. They were closest to Jesus, and throughout the Gospels we know that it was these three, Peter, James, and John, that Jesus would rely on. The New Testament reports three episodes when Jesus relies upon this group of three. First, at the home of Jairus. Jairus was a local leader, and Jesus permitted only James, John, and Peter from the whole circle of disciples to go with him into the house of Jairus to heal his child. The second occasion is the event that we recall, the Transfiguration. It comes at the very last of the season of Epiphany, the Sunday before we enter the season of Lent, which is another transitional time in the life of the church. Jesus chose James and John and Peter to go with him up the mountain. And on the mountain, Jesus was bathed in light and was seen talking to Moses and Elijah, symbolic of law or Torah and prophets in mainstream Judaism. The third was the crucial hour of prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane in Jerusalem. Just hours before Jesus' trial and crucifixion, And it was these three persons, James, John, and Peter, who Jesus asked to stay awake and stand watch with him as he struggled and as the cross grew closer. The Gospels also tell us two stories in which James, son of Zebedee, plays an important role. Two events happened at the end of Jesus' life. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus wants to go through the villages of Samaria, because if you walk from Samaria to Jerusalem, it's a much shorter distance than having to go around and down by the Dead Sea and up the Jordan or the Jericho road to Jerusalem. But Jesus was refused hospitality, and James and John wanted payback to the people of Samaria. And so they said, Jesus, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? It's no wonder that James and John got the nickname Sons of Thunder. When we walked out of the house this morning before we came to church, the moment Chris and I stepped out our door, that there was thunder, and I said, how appropriate. On a day when we look at the Son of Thunder, James and John. A little farther along in the gospel story, as the apostles and Jesus were drawing near to Jerusalem, James and John took Jesus aside for a little chat and set Jesus straight. Apparently they felt that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem to start a new kingdom, that Jesus would replace Herod on the throne. And they wanted special places of honor. And they said to Jesus, Teacher, we want you to do whatever we ask of you. Isn't that great? Isn't that a little forward? I get that question a lot of people who come to church. I want you to do something, whatever I ask of you. Jesus said, what do you want? James and John said, simple. Grant us to sit, me at your right hand and me at your left, in your glory. Simple. They were confident that Jesus would enter Jerusalem and soon be the Davidic Messiah. And when Jesus did, they wanted to make sure that they had a special place as leaders of this new kingdom. James and John, the sons of thunder, they probably didn't lack for ego. And they weren't short on the gift of ambition. Jesus treated their request with kindness and compassion, and instead of scolding them, he simply turns to James in a tender moment and he says, can you drink the cup that I am going to drink? And then the story of James comes to a rather abrupt conclusion. Turns out he does drink the cup that Jesus drinks. Because in the year 42, as the book of Acts tells us, King Herod, and don't think that's Herod the Great, it's Agrippa. Because in 40-42, that's the Herod that was on ruling over Jerusalem. In the year 42, Herod launches this violent protest on the Jesus movement. And arrests several of the disciples, and then kills James. And James thus becomes the first martyr of the original 12. Probably about 10 years after Jesus' life. The rest of that is legend. And according to tradition, James will leave before he's martyred in Jerusalem. Shortly after the life of Jesus, James will be the one to go into Spain and to preach. And then James will have a vision of Mary, who tells James to go back to Jerusalem, and he does in his martyr there under Herod Agrippa. That's legend that doesn't pop up until 8 centuries later. It was in the year 813 that the tomb of James was discovered in northeastern Spain, or where tradition says that James was discovered. And this place came to be called Santiago de Compostela. And it is a fantastic, I've not been there, some of you may have seen that. But this place is a destination. It is the destination for hundreds and thousands of pilgrims that still walk 484 miles from France to Spain. It's called the Camino de Santiago. Santiago is Spanish for James, and it's now the site of this beautiful basilica that in the Middle Ages was only third behind Rome and Jerusalem. And it lies at the end of the 484-mile French Pilgrim's Road. In the center of this church, Santiago de Compostela, the spot that most churches reserve for Jesus. We have crosses in ours, but in the middle of this church is James, son of Zebedee, brother of John, and the first of the 12 to be martyred. This is the resting place for this apostle. It's been a journey with you. It's been a journey trying to find all of the information that we have or know concerning the closest of Jesus' followers. I think that the more we understand about the earliest followers, the more we are informed about our faith. The 12 apostles, the ones whom Jesus left his mission and his message in care of. We are their spiritual descendants. We are probably not much like them, but we are their spiritual descendants. And their mission and their message about spending time with Jesus is the mission and message that we claim. For most of the 12, as we've seen in the study, their name only appears on a list, and we know nothing about them. Traditions and legends have grown up regarding each one of them. Are they true? Most likely not. Because these stories and traditions have grown up hundreds and hundreds of years after them. But, church, this is it. This is it. Behind every truth, behind every myth, there lies a truth. Behind every legend, there lies a reality. And it's that truth and that reality that we must claim and go forward as church. Because the footprints that these apostles, these 12, have left behind us, leads us to the places that we long to be led. Places that touch our heart. Places that transform us into the kind of disciples and apostles that Jesus calls us to be. At the heart of their life was a call. And it was a simple response to that call. God called them. They followed. God calls us. We invite you to come and be a part of a community that seeks to follow the voice of Christ in this 21st century world. And if you feel the desire to come and be a part of this community, we ask you to feel welcomed in doing that. Let us stand as we sing our hymn 357. We call ourselves